Welcome to the Everyday Matters podcast, a show from NetSmart. Everyday Matters is about the opportunity we have to make a difference. Our collective, cause-connected mission is about impacting healthcare in meaningful ways. We seek to provide a place to share stories about the progress being made, how to overcome challenges, and ideas to inspire. Each conversation is about the work being done and the opportunity before us. Whether it's about advocacy, awareness, or challenging stigmas, we know that together anything and everything is possible. Let's get into the show where we learn from yesterday in pursuit of tomorrow. Here, we all work to ensure every day matters.
Well, welcome to our Be the Difference podcast today, and I'm really excited. I happen to know the two individuals personally who we're going to be talking to today, and the focus is going to be on student athletics. It's going to be on athletics and the role that mental health and well-being plays. We had the opportunity last October to kick off a campaign called Be the Difference, really driving awareness and advocacy around this very topic. But before we jump into that, let me introduce our guests. I've got Truhe, athletic trainer, and I'll let her share a little bit about her role here in a second. And I also have Tim DeWeese. You've heard from Tim before. Tim is the mental health director here in Johnson County, Kansas. And we're going to really unpack this topic and speak to both the challenges, but more importantly, the opportunity. But before we begin, Kaylin, can you introduce yourself and talk a little bit about what you do?
Yeah. So like you said, I'm Truhe. I am an athletic trainer at Blue Valley High School. I'm employed by the University of Kansas Health System. I've been there for the last 7-8 years. And I work at the high school level. I cover all activities in sports, ranging from varsity to freshman, from football to golf, bowling, those kinds of things. And then in my spare time, I'm also the secretary for the Kansas Athletic Trainers Society and stepped into that role in January.
Oh, perfect. And you bring the right perspective that we need to be, I think, a different perspective that we don't often hear from. So thanks for joining us. Tim, can you give a brief introduction for those who don't know you?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. My name is Tim DeWeese, and I'm the director of Johnson County Mental Health Center. I've worked for the Mental Health Center for more than 25 years and just really focused on bringing the conversation up wherever I can within the community that I've been a part of for all these years and that we serve. So thanks for the invite, Tom.
No worries. And, I think we're going to jump right into it. I think, as we think about athletics, I think sometimes people don't always associate the topic of mental health and well-being with athletics. But I've been a coach. I happen to have 2 kids who have been involved in activities and sports. The whole when we think about coaching, I know I've made the statement, is your head in the game? Well, what we're really talking about is mindset. We're talking about the mental perspective of the focus that we have on the game or activity. There's always physical attributes to it, but we also know how we approach it can fundamentally make a significant difference in our performance. Tim, youth, sports, we know when we see data out there, we know that over 35% of elite athletes find some type of mental crisis or challenges within their pursuit. We know that 33% of all college students experience some significant challenge within their college career, whether it could be depression, anxiety, or those types of things. This has been a passion of yours your whole career. Why is this important that we need to talk about specifically around this demographic?
So I think it gets back to basic, and then we can bring it back to specifically athletes. So the fact is that good mental health is good physical health. And for whatever reason, a long time ago, we separated the mind from the body and we treated them separately. And the fact is that in order to have good physical health, you have to have good mental health and vice versa. And so when you think about athletes and you want them to perform at their highest level, then we want them to be physically healthy, But the fact is we also need them to be mentally healthy. And so anxiety, stress, all of those things can have an impact on all of us. But when we're in high performing situations, when we're in athletic programs or in high stress situations within games, that can impact an individual's mental health. And when we're talking about youngsters or we're talking about high school students, the fact is that we need to help them build that resilience, and that we have to focus on both their physical health, but their mental well-being. And so it's just important for us to focus on all of those things so that when those individuals that can move on into collegiate sports or even into pro sports, that they have a good foundation to deal with the stressors or the barriers that they're going to experience. One of the best examples that I can give, I've done some work with Ryan Leaf, who was a #1 draft choice in the NFL and just was not successful in the NFL. He was a great collegiate student. He was a great high school student. And he basically has shared with me that, in high school and in college, there was just never any talk about the barriers or building that resilience that he might experience as he moved into higher performing athletics, and that really took its toll on him. So I think it's really important that we realize that whatever it might be, whether a student is going into athletics or even if it's just academics, we have to be able to not only help people be physically healthy, but we also have to give them the tools to help their mental well-being and stay mentally healthy as well.
Well, Tim, I like how you put that. I mean, I think that's the conversation is so many times the stigma associated with mental health is more crisis related. And, you talked about, hey, being physically healthy, but also being mentally healthy. The reality is whatever someone pursues, and right now we're talking about activities and sports, there are stresses around it. It doesn't always work out the way that we wanted to. Your Ryan Leaf example, well documented, well storied, everyone knows, wasn't the ideal scenario. And I like that Ryan's been honest and transparent with his own story, wanting to help others and providing the tools and resources that you said, how do we give a foundation so that when a person finds themselves there, they can go to that point, okay, this isn't working and this is what I need to be able to, how I need to be able to address that.
One of the other things I think what we see is that, Ryan Leaf shared his story, but we see more and more every day athletes across both collegiate and pro sports coming out and sharing the struggles that they had and the importance of how we have to treat those and how we have to build that resilience, and so that we can make sure that our mental well-being is in top performance as well.
Well, I think that's the thing that's encouraging is we are seeing at all levels. We saw that during the Olympics. We're seeing that in pro sports where athletes are being more honest. And I think in many ways is opening the doors for conversations that didn't exist. So Caitlin, as an athletic trainer, is all this foreign? I'm guessing you never see any challenges with a person struggling with some kind of mental challenges as it relates to the sports performance.
Sure, never. No, I actually see a wide variety of things, whether it be the stress from school affecting their performance on the field or stress at home, those kinds of things. One thing that I see a lot of times and things that we're most concerned about is when an athlete defines themselves by their sport or doesn't have the security within themselves to not be participating in that sport, and then they get injured or that sport gets taken away from them, or they graduate from high school and they decide to be a student and not play, but they've always defined themselves as a football player, a soccer athlete, and the crisis that can happen because they don't know how to handle their stress because their stress was handled by being a part of that team, being a part of that sport. I've had an athlete who graduated, decided not to continue with their sport, which was totally fine, went to college, couldn't handle those stresses and the anxiety and the underlying conditions of anxiety, OCD that they had. And then that turned into an eating disorder and almost cost them their life. And that's what we don't want. That's what we see. And that's why, like you said, Tom, earlier, like I try to have conversations about who kids are as an individual and who they are outside of their sport and what brings them joy so that they can find confidence within themselves and understand their mental health, right? Their mental wellness that they need to understand about themselves that's outside of the other things of their life that they feel define them.
You just took the conversation to a completely different level. I mean, the whole concept, and this is a big topic, and Tim and I have talked about this, our ability to deal with loss. And I don't mean loss in a scoreboard, but when something isn't there anymore is something we don't know how to do well in this society. We've seen it over the past couple of years. And when something, a moment has defined us versus something that's bigger than the game, we've used the term as it's more than just a game, and we don't iterate or narrate around those pieces to help a student or an athlete understand the bigger story that's out there, it can lead to this moment of what now? Where's it at? And I think so much of the coaching and conversation has to be more than just a performance. And Tim, I guess what's your reaction to that? Because I know you've got a lot of thoughts around this piece of it, that how does a person who so much of their narrative and their story has been focused on maybe a certain role in an activity or a sport, and then that's gone, how do they manage that? Or what tools or resources would you tell them that they can leverage to help that?
Well, I couldn't have said it better than Caitlin. I mean, the fact is we need to help people find what brings them joy. And oftentimes, you're right, the sports may be that sole thing, but within our society in general, we often identify who we are by what we do, whether that be play sports, work at the mental health center, whatever it might be. And that's evident even just when you meet somebody new. Well, what do you do? And so what I think we really have to do early on is not only help people meet their goals and help them achieve what they want to achieve, but we also need to let people know how important it is that they just not define themselves as one thing. There are so many aspects about each of us as human beings, and we have to be aware of all of those things. So the fact is that while sports may be important, it's not going to necessarily maybe be important in your entire life. Although I would argue that there are ways. So you said you coach. I love basketball, but I wasn't a good basketball player, and I knew it from the get-go. But I also like setting the bench and encouraging my teammates on. But I turned that into a life of basketball. I've coached over the last 30 years youth sports. So there are ways that we can take our passion in sports and not just totally lose it. There are other avenues. And I think that being able to communicate that to athletes, but to be able to communicate that to students, whatever focus they have as they're growing up, that just isn't the single thing that defines them. There are many more points of things that designate or identify who we are, what we're going to be. And I think that we just need to encourage that. And I'm so glad, that Caitlin as an athletic trainer knows that. And I'm so glad that we're having these conversations with coaches, because they can impact a young person's life. What we know is that research tells us that one adult can impact a young person's life in a positive way. And so that could be a coach, that could be an athletic trainer, that could be, heck, it could be the maintenance guy that mows the field at the football field. But who knows? It's important for us all to be able to have those conversations and encourage that with young people.
Well, and I think you hit on it, Tim, is, as a parent, I'll speak as a parent of two kids, is the ability for another person who cross their paths to speak into their story, into their life. And that one word said in the right way, or that one story, or that one conversation can be so dramatically different than if I would have done it. That's why life is a team sport. I mean, I love the fact that you said that we got that, what brings us joy. And I think when you talk to most athletes, most people who pursue activities, it's the in-between times that they enjoy the most. It's the camaraderie and hanging around and the training and coming together and being able to do that. And I think that's when people press in. I know that in my own story, I can look back at moments of coaches that I will be indebted to forever, and others who I had to overcome some of those things. And, Caitlin, I guess I want to ask you a question. Let's segue into this whole topic, because one of your passions is around this training aspect. And I think as an athletic trainer, I'm curious, When you first began your career, was there a lot of focus and conversation on mental health in the beginning?
In college, we took psychology course, and we had kind of a couple classes of in our rehab course, right, talking about catastrophic injuries and how that can affect mental health. The one kind of piece missing was that piece of, okay, so what do we do, right? I can see it, I can recognize it, and I can have a conversation with the kid, but I know they need referred on to someone else. And in the collegiate system, we have a great pathway for that, right? With either sports psychologists or with the counseling system. But at the high school level, then where does that work for us, right? I mean, we have school counselors, but where do we know exactly what to do with our kids? And so we're kind of missing some elements. We have enough, but the confidence level, I think, for athletic trainers is a little bit lower than what they want it to be with our reactions with kids, if that makes sense. So just in talking with my colleagues, we have a good understanding, I think, individually of, hey, some athlete is struggling, but is it my role to help them? Is it someone else? How do we help them? That's where we need more education always, right? We always are learning. We always need more continuing education in that way.
So, and I think that's led you to a passion and some proposals to really institute more training around that. Do you mind talking a little bit about some of the work that you've done and things that you're saying, hey, we need to be able to iterate and edit on some of this that's out there and equip ourselves to handle what is not, they're both heart and mind conversations, not just for the athlete, if we're candid, it's also probably the parents too.
Yeah, well, in my own journey, so to start that, we had a traumatic event at Blue Valley that we had to help with, and so that we had to help save an athlete's life. And that actually brought about some, trauma for myself. And so I sought out to become and help other athletic trainers with crisis intervention training to be able to help them in crises of losing an athlete or having to perform a life-saving act of some kind that may cause them stress. And in that front, then in that education, I learned that we needed more education to be able to help our athletes in the same way. For me and most athletic trainers, in an event where we're calling 911, we have a plan, right? A kid broke his leg. We know this is exactly what we need to do. We need to brace, splint it, feel for circulation. Are they breathing, right? Those kinds of things. EMS comes, they get treatment. What do we do if someone's having a mental health crisis, whether on the severe end where we do need to call intervention and 911 and have that, or on the lower end where, I shouldn't say lower end, but on the other end, right, where they just need to seek out some counseling, right, or have conversation with someone. What's our plan? So then did a lot of research into how to create this plan, what components need to be a part of that. So alongside the Blue Valley School District, I have worked to build what we are calling a mental health referral plan, so that no matter if it's an athletic trainer, a coach, or an activity director, they have a plan, right? If someone comes to them with an emergent, a non-emergent kind of mental health event, what do we do and how do we help them, and who is available to help them within our district and community?
I think that's awesome. And I mean, those aren't things that when you first began your educational journey were a part of the conversation. And we all know we have to adapt and change as time moves on. And that's really what we're talking about today. Tim, I want you to unpack a couple of words there that may be new to some of the people listening in the audience. Trauma. I don't know if that word is always stood. Caitlin talked about the trauma associated with it. And many times I think people think of ER or some type of physical trauma event, but that's not what Caitlin was saying. He was talking about the mental aspect, the mental trauma associated with it. Tim, do you mind educating us on that and really helping break the stigma and also provide some clarity for what that means?
Yeah, absolutely. We all experience trauma. In fact, I would suggest that we have all been experiencing prolonged trauma over the last 2 years with a global pandemic, not to mention all of the polarization and social unrest that has happened over the last couple of years. So anytime you experience something that causes you undue stress and causes you to be anxious about something, those kinds of things impact us, whatever event, and it's all going to be different. One event that may be traumatic to me might not be traumatic to you, Tom, or Caitlin. But there are certain activities, saving someone's life, intervening in a situation where someone's acutely suicidal. Those are traumatic events, just experiencing something. And we all deal with them differently. But the fact is that in many situations, we just move on with our lives and we don't realize or we don't think about the impact that it had on ourselves or people around us. And I think more and more today, we have to be able to have those conversations to say, yeah, that was stressful and I haven't been sleeping real well. And to realize that's actually normal. When we have stressful events, we're going to have a reaction to that. It's when that reaction does not subside and it continues for weeks that then we need to intervene and say, okay, well, let's look and see how we can help you manage that situation or manage the trauma that you experienced. And I think that's important for us to understand and realize and know that all of us experience those things each and every day. It's not uncommon.
Yeah, I think, there's a slogan or mantra that I kind of live by. Some things find us, some we find, we choose forward. And really what you're saying is when those things come across our paths, the decisions we make to address those, to find clarity over them, often healing in them, is fundamental to our own well-being as we go forward.
Everyday Matters is not just a mantra, it's a movement, a foundation for those who are cause-connected, passionate, and vision-driven about opportunities for serving the most vulnerable among us. Everyday Matters is here to help. For more information, go to everydaymatters.com.
Caitlin, as you're sitting there talking about, the referral piece and being able to have the tools and resources for trainers, what you're really talking about is what we know as mental health first aid. And that's where our paths began to cross as we started looking at what kind of resources are out there, for the community. And specifically, how can we bring coaches to the table, referees, staff, students, to get that kind of training, to do that initial, how can I help? And then most importantly, refer to someone to go get help. And so with that, in October, we started having this Be the Difference campaign and conversation and said, what would be really cool is if we could put a challenge out there to go begin training coaches, athletic trainers, student athletes, parents in many cases. As you think about that, and you and I recently had the opportunity to meet with the local school district, as you look forward, what do you hope to see in the next year as we launch this campaign around mental health first aid training? And then I'm going to have Tim talk a little bit about what that means to the members in the audience who are curious. What are you talking about?
Well, I think as we discussed, our goal is hopefully to have 100 community members, coaches, athletic trainers, staff, referees, all of the above, right? Trained in mental health first aid or have some sort of training to help us have tools in our pocket to be able to help our student athletes and activity participants.
What does that mean to that person who's sitting out there? What do you mean, I was a Boy Scout. I had got my first aid merit badge. I can put together a tourniquet. I can set a splint, probably not well. I did get the badge, but the number of times that's actually happened to happen in my life, 0. Right. The number of times I've had to come across someone struggling with loss, maybe the passing of a loved one, someone who's experienced a traumatic event and feeling depression, are more times than I can count. And in many ways, I see this as being the absolute essential that we all need to press on to give us the tools and resources. Because Tim, as you said earlier, the right word and the right conversation at the right time can provide a positive experience for that person in helping them forward. Can you share with us what it means to be mental health first aid trained?
Yeah, so mental health first aid is a course that teaches you how to identify, understand, and respond to signs of mental health and substance use issues. The training gives each of us the skills that you'll need to reach out to providers, to provide initial help, and to support someone who may be developing a mental health or substance abuse problem, or who are experiencing a crisis. So really the goal for us is to make mental health first aid as common as CPR or the first aid training that you described as a Boy Scout. So that we know that when we come in contact with someone who's experiencing some sort of mental health crisis, or maybe they're just having an ongoing mental health issue and we're aware of that. It gives us the skills to be able to intervene and really help that individual get the professional care that they need.
And it's an 8-hour course. It's done over a day, and it's not just all classroom. So if someone's sitting there, is this something I want to do? It's a lot of great conversation. We had the opportunity over the past couple of years to offer this to various groups that are out there, and I will tell you, almost always people walk away blown away around what the course was able to provide them. I've been certified now 3 times. It's a 2-year certification. There is a short assessment at the end. It's not, for those who don't like tests, I may be one of those people. It's not going to be super taxing, but I'll tell you, you don't have to worry about it because the conversation and the collaboration that happens in the room is phenomenal. And I'll tell you, maybe some of the most powerful times are the stories that people share in their own. Something happens throughout the day where the veil comes down, the walls come down, and people begin talking about their own journey and story. And I think many times people may come in with their arms crossed and I'm going to get through this. And by the end of the day, they've developed new friendships, new connections and relationships. Kaylin, to that coach out there who's, you know what, I don't know, I'm trying to put together schemes and I'm trying to do all this and I've got so many other things. Why would you encourage or challenge them that they need to make this a priority?
I see it more often than I'd like, I think, but I think that really, truly the mental health of their athletes is really the thing that affects their scheme on a game night, right? So if your athlete is worried about, girlfriend, boyfriend that broke up with them, or life-altering event of, losing a family member, or even they didn't do well on a test, and that stress and anxiety is directly related, is going to affect their performance in some way, shape, or form, whether it is them not providing or producing the scheme that coach wants them to, or ultimately resulting in an injury, whether it be minor or major. I mean, it truly does affect their performance because their mind isn't going to be 100% focused on the physical skill that they're doing. And if you're not 100% focused on it, it puts you at risk. And that's what we tell athletes all the time, and my injured athletes all the time too. If you're going to be focused more on your injured extremity, it's unsafe to put you in the game because you're going to get hurt worse. So if your mind isn't 100% focused on the activity that you're performing, then you aren't going to perform well. You're going to put yourself at risk. And it physically and mentally, it has to be the same in that front. So it's just as important, their physical health, as their mental health.
I love it. You're really talking about giving people the confidence to have what are some of the hardest conversations in our life. And they're not, they're hard for a reason because we know that difficult choices have to be made. And I know coaches, and when we announced this back in October, I had a referee come up and say, Tom, can we do this? And I didn't even think about it at the time. They're having tough conversations all the time. And so I couldn't agree with you more. It's about if you're really focused on helping that student athlete be the best of their potential, you have to bring the mental aspect to the table. Tim, I can hear, so I've said these at times, how much mental health training I had when I was a youth? None. There wasn't even a conversation. As a matter of fact, it was really seen as a form of weakness. And I know I can hear some say, well, I didn't have to have it when I was young. Why do we have to have it now? I would say, one, times changed. I think we do get better. I also contend that the challenges our kids find are much different than I ever found. The number of inputs, the number of feedback, whether it's social media or others, is a far more compile than I ever had to. I dare say my kids have had to bring in and think through things, far more data points than I did by the time I was 30, and yet they're still teenagers in that. I would ask you, Tim, to the student athlete that's out there, why would you encourage them to press in on this topic, to embrace this topic and learn more, and what things will they get from it as well?
So I think that first and foremost, we want to be successful. And in my experiences is that high school students, young athletes, they want to be successful. And it gets back to what Caitlin was saying. If you can't be focused on the task at hand, if you can't be focused on the game, if you can't be focused on whatever it might be because of something underlying, whether that be you're hungry because you didn't have a meal, or you're not sure where you're going to lay your head tonight because your family's homeless. It could be those big of things, or it could be, like she said, that you're worried about your girlfriend and you had an argument before the game, or whatever it might be, that you're not going to compete at your highest level. And so if these young people want to be successful, they want to compete at a high level, whether that be at sports or whether that be at academics or whatever extracurricular activity they're participating in, taking care of their mental well-being is just as important as their physical well-being. And that in order for us to be and perform at a high level, we need to be mentally healthy and we need to be physically healthy. And so for me, it gets down to the whole notion that this idea of, back in the day where people just said, you need to kind of suck it up or move on or drive on. The fact is that what our youth experience today is much different. You already mentioned it. That's the issue of technology. In my mind, it's an agitator to all kinds of things. There's so many positive things, but there are also a lot of negative consequences. And so we need to understand that. We as adults need to understand that it's different for young people today. And I would say that, moving into middle school and from middle school into high school, that can be some of the most challenging and rough times for a young person. So being able to have conversations about mental health and about how to overcome their struggles, how to build resilience, because that's really what we're talking about. We're talking about building a resilient a young person. If we're able to have those conversations and give them the skills to cope, then we're not only going to see successful teenagers, we're going to see successful young adults, and we're going to see successful adults later on in life.
Well, Tim, I think you underscored it well. In an era where we seem to focus on the differences, there's much more better things that we're more alike. And you just described, we all want to be successful. We all want to find joy, as you talked about earlier. Kaylin, we all want to be able to live out the thing that we are very passionate about. And yet at the same time, that it's a part of a bigger thing that brings us excitement for the things that we're pursuing. Well, let's land here, and I'm going to do this on just one last closing thought from both of you is, what's a word, piece of encouragement, maybe a short example to that person listening right now who is looking for that positive encouragement for taking that next step that they need, whether it's, hey, I'm going to go try out, or I'm going to go overcome this adversity. Maybe I've had a setback and injury, Caitlin, as you've talked about, or I'm just not feeling it. What would you say to them right now?
I have had lots of these conversations. And I think the one thing that I learned myself that I share with athletes a lot is you have to do in your heart what you know is right, no matter what words that you are hearing from anyone else around you. If you want to go and try out for the team, even though people are telling you that you can't, do it because you want to, and all you need is your belief in you, and others will believe, right? Like, you need to do what is best for you in your life and what you feel is right in your heart always. And that goes for whether it be injury recovery, returning to the field if they feel like they can or cannot, right? Returning too soon. If they know that that's wrong, they know that in their heart and they have to follow that. And I think it leads them to great places. If they follow their own thought, their own belief of themselves, it can lead them to so many things in their future that are going to bring them joy and happiness.
I love that you're giving people the courage and the permission to follow what they know is true. And in a world where we're constantly being challenged to do what everyone else is telling us to do, your encouragement is go do what you know is the right thing. Listen to other people, connect, collaborate, and then go do that. Tim, how about you?
Well, the first thing I say is that we are all human beings, and that we can all learn, change, and grow as human beings. And it gets back to what Caitlin said, is that, and I would take it one step farther, to take that chance, maybe to try out for the team. And the bottom line is that failure is not a bad thing. From failure comes growth. It comes learning. It comes changing. And so the fact is I've seen many kids, I've seen actually pro athletes who failed at trying out for the team in junior high and high school and went on to have pro careers. The fact is that when we experience barriers or when we experience failures, we have an opportunity. We each have an opportunity to make a decision at that moment in time. Do we want to learn? Do we want to change? And do we want to grow from that experience? And if we do, then we become more resilient and we prepare ourselves for life. And I think that is the most important thing, is that we're all human beings and we can learn, change, and grow every single day.
Tim, I love it. You just summarized a growth mindset. And, as I'm sitting here listening to you talking, you reminded me the times I've learned most in life was through adversity, was through challenges, and yes, failure. And failure is the opportunity to how can I get better? And I think when we approach those things with that kind of mindset, our whole perspective on it changes. It doesn't become an identity, it becomes an opportunity. And I think that's the challenge. And sometimes we got to shut off some of the noise, turn off some of the applications, because in the real adventure of the things that we go pursue, when we press in and we get better from that, that's really what the bigger story is. That's also where the joy is. I want to thank you both for being here today. It's a great conversation to our audience. We'll share information in the notes around all the various things that we've talked about, the various programs of getting trained, the campaign, and how to go out there. But if I were to stress one thing to take away from this, I think the solutions that we're looking for, the opportunities we're seeking, is in the example that Tim and Caitlin just shared. We're talking to difference makers today. People who don't accept status quo and are pressing in to go do something. And I would encourage us all to go find a way to be the good that we seek, an opportunity to speak that word to a person, to do a random act of kindness, to take chance, as Tim said, and go do that, to give ourselves permission, as Caitlin said, to go do the things that in our heart and mind we know we need to go do. And most of all, that every day we have the opportunity to be the difference. And that's what today's conversation is all about. So thank you both. Thank you to our audience. Keep the suggestions and feedback coming. We look forward to more conversations.
You've been listening to Everyday Matters, a NetSmart podcast. Keep connected with us by subscribing to the show in your favorite podcast player. If you like what you've heard, please rate the show. That helps us keep sharing the stories that inspire our communities. Thanks for listening. Until next time.